The laughter echoed across the glass-walled executive lounge before anyone even looked at the old man. Marcus Hale, CEO of the biggest commercial real estate company in the city, leaned back in his chair with a half smile as his board members gathered around the polished conference table. The quarterly celebration had run late. Empty coffee cups, expensive catered food, and half-finished presentations still covered the room. The janitor quietly pushed his cleaning cart inside. His gray uniform was neatly pressed, though faded from years of washing. His name tag simply read Walter. He lowered his eyes and waited. "Sorry," he said softly. "I can come back." Marcus glanced at him, then at the executives around him. "No," Marcus said with a chuckle. "Go ahead. We all know the cleaning crew works after the people who actually make the money." A few people laughed. Walter nodded once. "No problem, sir." He started wiping fingerprints from the long conference table. One of the younger executives looked at Walter's old wristwatch. "That thing belongs in a museum." More laughter. Walter smiled politely. "It still tells the right time." Marcus shook his head. "You've been here what, 15 years? 18. 18 years pushing the same mop." Walter looked down at the floor he had just polished. "Yes, sir." Marcus picked up his expensive jacket. "I don't know how you do it. I'd lose my mind." Walter didn't answer. He simply stepped aside so the executives could leave. As Marcus walked toward the elevator, he looked back one last time. Walter was carefully straightening a family photo someone had left face down on the table. For just a second, Marcus noticed something strange. The old janitor handled that picture with the same care someone might use holding a priceless painting. Then the elevator doors closed. Nobody thought about Walter again. Not until 37 minutes later. The first alarm wasn't loud. Just a single electronic chime. People barely noticed. Then every light inside the 48-story tower flickered. Computer screens went black. The elevators froze. Emergency lights washed the halls in a dim red glow. A mechanical voice filled every floor. "Security lockdown initiated. Please remain where you are." Conversation stopped. People looked at each other. Someone laughed nervously. "It's probably another system test." Then every security door slammed shut. The sound rolled through the building like thunder. Metal locking into metal. Floor after floor. Office workers rushed toward exits. Nothing opened. Phones lost signal. Wi-Fi disappeared. Even the executive elevators refused to move. Marcus frowned. What is going on? Nobody had an answer. Outside, police cars began arriving. Inside, hundreds of employees were trapped. And somewhere deep beneath the building, Walter quietly set down his mop. He listened. His calm expression changed for the first time all night. "Not again," he whispered. Most people in the building knew Walter only as the quiet man who cleaned up after everyone else had gone home. He arrived before sunset every weekday. He left just before sunrise. He never complained, never called in sick, never asked for favors. If someone spilled coffee, Walter appeared. If a light burned out, Walter reported it before anyone noticed. If someone had a bad day, Walter somehow knew when to leave a fresh cup of coffee on their desk without saying a word. People appreciated him, but they never really saw him. To most employees, he was simply part of the building, like the elevators, like the carpets, like the walls. Only a handful of people knew his routine. Every evening at exactly 6:45, Walter stopped in the small employee cafeteria. He bought 1 cup of black coffee, 1 plain turkey sandwich, always the same order. He carried a folded newspaper tucked under his arm, even though he rarely opened it. Instead, he watched people, not in a creepy way, more like someone making sure everything was where it belonged. He remembered names, birthdays, children's graduations, favorite football teams. When the receptionist's husband had surgery, Walter quietly left homemade soup at her desk. When a security guard lost his father, Walter attended the funeral even though no one had invited him. He never expected thanks. Kindness was simply part of his routine. That was why Officer Denise Carter recognized him immediately when she arrived outside the building. She had worked downtown for nearly 12 years. Every Friday night, Walter handed coffee to officers walking their patrol. Sometimes he packed extra sandwiches. He always remembered Denise like 2 packets of sugar. She stared up at the locked tower. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Inside, Marcus was already losing patience. He slammed his phone onto the conference table. No signal? The IT director shook his head. Nothing. The satellite phones? Dead. Marcus looked around. This building has 3 backup systems. They're offline too. A nervous silence settled over the room. Then someone noticed the security monitors. Every camera feed had frozen, except one. Basement level 3, the oldest maintenance corridor. The picture flickered. There was Walter, standing perfectly still, looking directly into the camera. Then the screen went black. Marcus frowned. Why would the janitor be down there? Nobody answered. Walter moved quickly through the dim maintenance hallway. Gone was the slow shuffle everyone recognized. His steps were steady, purposeful. He unlocked a small storage room with an old brass key hanging beneath his shirt. Inside were shelves filled with ordinary cleaning supplies. Buckets, mops, paint, replacement light bulbs. Unless someone noticed the back wall. Walter reached behind an old cabinet and pressed 3 hidden switches in a precise order. A section of shelving quietly slid aside. Behind it was a steel door. No label, no handle, only a keypad. Walter entered 8 numbers without hesitation. The heavy door unlocked. Beyond it sat a room that looked nothing like a janitor's closet. Rows of monitors, blueprints covering one wall, emergency communication equipment, old photographs, detailed maps of every inch of the building. Walter took a slow breath. He switched on the monitors. Most displayed static. One remained active. A flashing warning appeared. Unauthorized override detected. Walter's face tightened. So they found it. He picked up an old landline telephone. No dial tone. He expected that. He opened a metal cabinet and removed a worn leather notebook. Every page was filled with handwritten notes. Dates, maintenance changes, security upgrades, emergency procedures. Nearly 3 decades of observations. He flipped directly to one page. A sentence was circled in red ink. If the network fails completely, trust the original design. Walter closed the notebook. He looked toward the ceiling. They're using the building against itself. 30 floors above him, panic spread. Employees crowded stairwell doors that refused to unlock. Some cried. Others pounded on reinforced glass. Parents tried calling children. Nothing connected. The emergency intercom repeated the same message every 60 seconds. Remain calm. Nobody was calm. Marcus demanded answers from building security. The chief of security looked embarrassed. I've never seen this before. You built this system. I inherited it. What does that mean? The original infrastructure predates most of us. Marcus stared. How old? Almost 30 years. Marcus rubbed his forehead. So nobody understands our own building. The security chief hesitated. There was one person. Who? The engineer who oversaw the original construction. Marcus looked hopeful. Call him. He passed away 12 years ago. Marcus cursed under his breath. What about his records? We digitized everything. And? The servers are locked. Another silence. Then a young assistant quietly spoke from the back of the room. There may be someone else. Everyone turned. She swallowed. The janitor. Marcus blinked. What? I've seen him helping maintenance crews. So? He always knew where everything was. The security chief slowly nodded. I thought he was just experienced. She shook her head. No. He corrected licensed engineers, and they listened. Marcus remembered Walter standing beside the elevator, his worn shoes, his faded uniform, his calm eyes. For the first time that evening, Marcus realized he had never actually asked the old man who he was. Outside, police established a command center. Firefighters checked every entrance. None would open. Even emergency override systems had failed. Officer Denise watched technicians argue over computer screens. One firefighter walked over. "We've got hundreds inside." She nodded. "I know." No communication. She looked toward the tower. "What about maintenance tunnels?" He frowned. "Blueprints don't match." "What do you mean?" "There are hallways underground that aren't on the current plans." Denise looked up again. Her thoughts went straight to Walter, the quiet janitor who somehow knew every pipe, every fuse box, every locked door. She reached into her pocket. There was an old paper business card Walter had given her years ago after helping jumpstart her patrol car during a winter storm. On the back, he had handwritten one sentence: "If you ever can't find me, look below the foundation." At the time, she had laughed. She stared at the card. Then, at the tower. "What were you trying to tell me, Walter?" Inside the hidden room beneath the building, Walter zipped up an old canvas utility bag. He slipped the leather notebook inside, checked a flashlight that was older than many of the employees upstairs, and rested his hand for a moment on a faded photograph pinned beside the door. It showed a much younger Walter standing in front of the tower while it was still under construction. Beside him stood another man in a hard hat, both smiling, with dusty boots and rolled-up blueprints in their hands. Walter touched the edge of the photo with one finger. "I hope I remember what you taught me," he whispered. Then he opened another steel door that disappeared into the darkness beneath the building. Within seconds, the only sound left was the distant echo of his footsteps. And above him, the countdown that no one else knew existed had already begun. Marcus had built his career on staying calm under pressure. Hostile takeovers, market crashes, natural disasters that shut down entire office parks. He had handled them all. But this felt different. This wasn't a business problem. It was something alive, hidden inside the very building that carried his company's name. The emergency lights flickered again. This time they stayed dim. A nervous voice broke the silence. "Sir, the temperature is changing." Marcus looked up. The air conditioning had stopped. The air inside the executive floor suddenly felt heavy. People loosened their ties. Someone wiped sweat from their forehead. Then every monitor in the conference room flashed at once. Instead of security cameras, a black screen appeared with white letters. "Core access denied." The message vanished before anyone could read it twice. "What core?" Marcus asked. Walter moved through a narrow concrete tunnel beneath the tower, his flashlight cutting a thin beam through the darkness. The tunnel wasn't part of the public building. It had been built first, long before the marble lobby, before the glass elevators, before the executive offices. The walls still carried faded construction markings. Some of them were written in Walter's own handwriting. He stopped at an old steel valve. A layer of dust covered it. He brushed it away. Stamped into the metal were 4 initials: RHM. Walter smiled sadly. "Still holding together, Richard." He remembered the day those initials were carved. Richard Monroe had been the chief structural engineer. Walter had been his security system supervisor. They weren't just co-workers. They had been best friends. Richard believed every building should protect the people inside it. Walter believed every security system should protect people from those who wanted to do harm. Together, they designed something unusual, a building that could seal itself if a real threat ever appeared. But only under one condition. A human being, not a computer, had to confirm the danger. Richard never trusted full automation. "Machines follow rules," he used to say. "People understand mercy." Walter reached another locked hatch. Someone had forced it open. Fresh scratches covered the steel. His stomach tightened. "They've already been here." 30 floors above, fear spread faster than facts. Rumors filled every hallway. There are armed men downstairs. No, it's a cyber attack. I heard there's a gas leak. My husband says the FBI is outside. Every story sounded believable. None of them were confirmed. Near the accounting department, a pregnant employee sat against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. Another woman knelt beside her. "We're okay. I can't reach my husband." "You will." "What if he thinks—" Her voice cracked. The other woman squeezed her hand. "He knows you're fighting to get home." Across the hall, a young intern quietly removed his suit jacket and folded it into a pillow for her. No one asked him to. He just did it. Fear had locked the doors. Kindness was still finding a way through them. Outside, Officer Denise Carter watched a city engineer spread faded blueprints across the hood of a patrol car. "They don't match." She frowned. "You said that already." "No," he pointed toward the lower levels. "These blueprints show 3 basement floors." "So?" "The building inspection files show 5. Denise looked closer. "Where are the other 2? "They don't exist. They have to. They've been erased from every digital record." A silence settled between them. Someone had hidden 2 entire underground levels from history. Walter reached the end of the tunnel. Another steel door waited. Unlike the others, this one had fresh fingerprints. Someone had entered less than an hour ago. He slowly opened it. The room beyond had once been spotless. Now cables lay scattered across the floor. Equipment cases sat open. Computer hardware blinked in unfamiliar racks. Portable servers hummed loudly. Walter knelt beside one. He didn't recognize the equipment. Professional, military grade, expensive, definitely not installed by building maintenance. Then he noticed something else. Coffee cups, energy drink cans, fresh footprints, at least 4 people, maybe 5. They hadn't come to steal. They had come prepared to stay. Walter opened a nearby cabinet. Empty. His face fell. The emergency override keys were gone. Back upstairs, Marcus watched Security Chief Alan Brooks pace across the room. Alan had worked in the building for almost 20 years. He looked pale. Marcus stopped him. "Tell me everything you're not telling me." Alan hesitated. "I signed a confidentiality agreement." "I'm your CEO." Alan lowered his voice. "When this tower was built, there were rumors." "What kind?" "That it wasn't just an office building." Marcus stared. "What does that mean?" "It was designed to be a secure command facility if the city ever faced a major emergency." Marcus laughed once. "That's impossible." "I thought so too." "Then why mention it?" "Because every few years, I'd see the janitor disappear into areas that technically don't exist." Marcus felt a chill. "You mean Walter?" Alan nodded. "I asked him once." "What did he say?" He smiled. "And?" He said, "Some doors stay locked until people forget why they were built." Marcus no longer found the story amusing. Walter searched the room carefully. Nothing had been left by accident. Every cable was organized. Every tool had a purpose. Whoever broke in knew exactly where to go. That was the frightening part. This wasn't random. Someone had studied the building for months, maybe years. Then he found it. A folded sheet of paper lying beneath a keyboard. Not dropped. Placed, waiting. He unfolded it. One sentence. "We knew you'd come." Walter's breathing slowed. Not from fear, from focus. Someone knew about him. Someone knew he wasn't just a janitor. He folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. Then another sound echoed through the room. Footsteps. Not close. Above him. Walter turned off his flashlight. Darkness swallowed everything. He listened. One person, moving carefully. Not maintenance. Not security. The footsteps stopped. Then a metal grate overhead shifted. A flashlight beam swept across the room. Walter stayed perfectly still behind a concrete support column. A voice whispered into a radio. Room 7 is empty. A pause. No sign of him yet. Walter's eyes narrowed. They weren't looking for the override. They were looking for him. On the 42nd floor, people had begun sharing food. The catered desserts from the executive meeting were cut into tiny pieces. Bottled water was passed from office to office. An elderly accountant checked the blood sugar of a coworker with diabetes. Receptionists comforted interns. Managers sat beside assistants. Job titles disappeared. Everyone was simply trying to help. Marcus watched it all. Earlier that evening, he joked about the people who actually make the money. Now, none of that mattered. The janitor, the receptionist, the accountant, the intern. Every person trapped in the tower mattered exactly the same. It was an uncomfortable thought, one he couldn't push away. Outside, a black SUV rolled quietly through the police perimeter. Federal agents stepped out. One of them approached Denise. "You've been here the longest?" She nodded. He held up an old photograph. "Have you seen this man?" Denise looked down. It was Walter, but not the Walter she knew. This picture showed him nearly 30 years younger, clean cut, wearing a dark government windbreaker. An identification badge hung around his neck. She looked back up. "Who is he?" The agent didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked a question. "What do you know about your janitor?" Denise smiled faintly. "He never lets anyone drink bad coffee." The agent almost smiled. Then his expression turned serious. "His real name is Walter Bennett." She frowned. "I know." "No." He shook his head. "You know the name on his employee file." He opened another folder. Inside were pages stamped with heavy black markings. Most of the words were covered. Only one line remained visible. "Lead Physical Security Architect." Denise stared. "For this building?" The agent looked up at the towering skyscraper. "For this building," he paused, "and 6 others that were never publicly connected." Deep below the tower, Walter reached the oldest section of the underground complex. The concrete changed here. Older, thicker, built to survive far more than fire. At the end of the corridor stood a massive circular steel door. It looked more like something from a military bunker than an office building. He placed his palm against it. A faint green light blinked. Then, nothing. No click, no unlock. Walter tried again. Still nothing. His access had been removed. For the first time since the lockdown began, genuine worry crossed his face. "If I can't open this..." He looked back into the darkness, and someone already did. A deep mechanical vibration rolled through the floor beneath his boots. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Somewhere inside the hidden levels of the tower, a machine that had slept for decades had just come to life. And Walter knew exactly what it meant. Someone wasn't trying to escape the building. They were trying to take control of it. Walter pressed his ear against the cold steel door. The vibration came again, long, steady, closer this time. He closed his eyes, searching his memory. Richard's voice came back as clearly as if they were standing together beneath the unfinished tower. "If you ever hear the core generators cycle twice without authorization, don't chase the machine. Find the people." Walter opened his eyes. "They're not after the building," he whispered. "They're after everyone inside it." He turned and ran. 42 floors above, Marcus stood near the conference room window, staring at the flashing police lights far below. The glass made the city seem close enough to touch, yet it had never felt farther away. An assistant hurried toward him. "Sir." "What is it?" "The emergency lighting just changed." Marcus looked up. The red lights had faded. Small white lights began glowing along the baseboards. They formed a path through the hallway. People noticed immediately. "Is it leading somewhere?" "No idea." The security chief studied them. His eyes widened. "I've seen this before." Marcus looked at him. "When?" "During an emergency systems demonstration, years ago." "What does it mean?" Allen swallowed. It means someone with the highest level of authorization is trying to move civilians to a safe area. Marcus looked toward the glowing hallway. Walter. In the hidden levels below, 4 strangers watched dozens of screens. Every floor of the tower appeared on giant monitors. One man leaned over a keyboard. He found room 7. Another answered without looking up. We expected that. What about the vault? No access yet. And Bennett? The leader smiled. He'll go where he always goes. You sound sure. I've studied him for 3 years. The room fell silent. Then an alarm chimed. A technician frowned. Movement on level 4. The leader stepped closer. One tiny white dot moved quickly across the underground map. Another appeared. Then another. He frowned. That's impossible. What? There shouldn't be anyone else down there. Walter wasn't alone. 3 building engineers emerged from an old maintenance passage carrying flashlights. The youngest froze when he recognized him. Walter? Walter nodded. You remembered the tunnel. The oldest engineer smiled. You told us 20 years ago. Walter looked surprised. You listened? The engineer shrugged. You always said the old routes matter. Walter's face softened for just a moment. Then he pointed ahead. We don't have much time. Without another question, the 3 engineers followed him. No titles, no arguments, only trust. On the executive floor, Marcus made a decision that surprised everyone. We're moving. A vice president shook his head. What if it's a trap? Marcus looked around at the frightened employees. What if staying here is? He turned toward the glowing lights. If Walter is guiding us. He stopped. Earlier that evening he had laughed at the man. Now he trusted him with hundreds of lives. Then we're following. Slowly, people stood. A mother picked up her sleeping son from the daycare office. An intern helped an elderly accountant to his feet. The line began moving through the hallway. 1 floor at a time. Quietly, carefully, no panic, only hope. Outside, Officer Denise watched through binoculars. They're moving. The federal agent beside her nodded. Good. You expected this? No. Then why aren't you surprised? He looked at the tower. Because Walter Bennett never built a system with only one way out. The strangers underground noticed the movement almost immediately. Civilians are leaving the executive floors. The leader's smile disappeared. How? No network command was issued. He understood. Bennett. He grabbed a radio. Intercept him. Walter and the engineers reached a heavy mechanical room. Unlike the others, it looked ordinary. Pipes, boilers, electrical panels. Walter walked directly to an old gray cabinet covered in dust. One engineer laughed. I've walked past that thing 1,000 times. Walter opened it. Inside was a bright red lever. No electronics, no screen, just steel. Richard had insisted on it decades earlier. Every smart system needs one honest piece of metal. Walter wrapped both hands around the lever. It still works? It has to. He pulled. Nothing happened. For one terrifying second. Then, the entire building shook, not violently, just enough for everyone to feel it. Across every floor, locked fire doors slowly released. Emergency stairwells unlocked. Fresh air rushed through ventilation shafts. Hundreds of electronic locks clicked open almost at once. Cheers echoed through the tower. People began crying. Some hugged complete strangers. The underground control room exploded with alarms. We've lost the lockdown. Backup systems offline. Exit controls restored. The leader slammed his fist against the desk. How? A technician stared at his screen. There was a mechanical override. The leader whispered the word like it offended him. Mechanical. He had planned for software, satellites, networks, encryption. He had forgotten one old man with a steel lever. The first employees reached the street. Police officers guided them behind barricades. Families rushed forward. Tears replaced fear. Parents held children. Husbands found wives. Co-workers counted heads. Marcus was among the last to leave. He stopped just outside the entrance. Something felt wrong. Walter, the security chief, looked around. He never came out. Marcus turned back toward the building. Without thinking, he started walking. An officer grabbed his arm. You can't go back. Marcus pulled free. He saved every one of us. I know. So, I'm not leaving him. Officer Denise stepped forward. I'll go. Marcus shook his head. We both will. Deep underground, Walter leaned against the wall. The effort had taken more out of him than he wanted to admit. His shoulder ached. His breathing came harder. The years had finally caught up with him. Then he heard footsteps. He smiled without turning. I was wondering how long it'd take you. Marcus stopped a few feet away. You knew I'd come? Walter looked back. I hoped. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Marcus finally broke the silence. I'm sorry. Walter tilted his head. For what? For tonight. Walter smiled gently. I've cleaned worse messes. Marcus laughed, despite himself. Then his eyes drifted to the old photograph still tucked into Walter's notebook. Who's the man beside you? Walter looked down at the picture. My best friend. The engineer? Walter nodded. He died before we finished writing down everything we learned. Marcus studied the faded faces. So you stayed. Walter looked around the underground room. Someone had to remember. Days later, the truth became public. Not every detail. Some secrets stayed buried beneath the tower, but enough came out. Authorities announced that a highly organized criminal group had secretly entered abandoned infrastructure beneath the building, intending to seize control of critical systems for a massive ransom scheme. They had counted on digital access. They had never imagined the original designers had left behind simple mechanical safeguards that could only be operated by someone who truly knew the building. The arrests made national news. Reporters crowded the sidewalks. Television trucks lined the block. Everyone wanted to interview the mysterious janitor. Walter politely declined every request. 1 week later, the company held another meeting in the same executive conference room. Only this time, the mood was different. Marcus stood at the front. Walter waited near the door, clearly wishing he were somewhere else. Marcus smiled. Come up here. Walter shook his head. I'm fine where I am. So am I. Marcus walked all the way to the back of the room instead. Every executive watched. Every employee watched. Marcus stopped in front of Walter. I introduced you the wrong way the first time. He turned toward the room. This is Walter Bennett. He paused. The man who protected this building before most of us even knew it existed. Silence filled the room. Then someone started clapping, another joined, then another. Within seconds, every person in the room was on their feet. The applause didn't fade. It grew louder. Walter looked embarrassed. He lowered his head, just as he always had. Marcus noticed something. Walter still wore the same faded uniform, the same old watch, the same worn work shoes. Nothing about him had changed, only the way people finally saw him. Marcus reached into his pocket. I have one more thing. He handed Walter a small wooden box. Inside was a brand new name badge. It didn't say janitor. It didn't say maintenance. It simply read, Walter Bennett, Guardian of the Tower. Walter looked up, his eyes shining. I was never alone, he said quietly. I just happened to be the one holding the keys. Months later, employees still told the story to every new hire. Not about the lockdown, not about the criminals, not even about the hidden levels beneath the building. They told the story of the quiet man everyone walked past for years, the one who remembered birthdays, who fixed problems before anyone noticed, who carried coffee to tired police officers, who treated every person with the same quiet respect, whether they cleaned floors or sat in the corner office. And from that day forward, whenever someone saw Walter pushing his old cleaning cart through the lobby, they no longer looked through him. They looked him in the eye. They smiled. And Walter, as always, smiled back before quietly getting on with the work that had never been about mops, buckets, or polished floors. It had always been about taking care of people.